Hello aspirants, I am Colonel DJS Chehel. Today in this session I will be talking about the Services Selection Board का organization और उसकी history के बारे में कुछ बताऊंगा. Now for the first time it was during the First World War that a need was felt कि भाई armed forces के जो officers हैं वो एक आला दर्जे के होने चाहिए and therefore the American Army introduced the psychological tests to ensure that the officers that were selected were able to work in a very intense and hostile environment. Taking cue from that, during the Second World War, the British Army introduced the War Office Selection Boards. This was established in the year 1942. Now, these War Office Selection Boards introduced psychological tests which were inspired from the German Army, and also it had certain group activities to check out the group dynamics as also sociometric responses of the officers who were selected. Now, the Indian selection process is based on the British system. And soon after our independence, there was an organization that was set up which is called the Defense Institute of Psychological Research, or the DIPR. This is located in Delhi. Now, this organization is responsible for the overall evolution of the selection process or the selection system in the Indian Armed Forces. In fact, all the trainers of Olive Green's Institute have been trained by the Defense Institute of Psychological Research. And a very interesting thing that I would like to tell you is that all those officers who've undergone training in the DIPR need not necessarily go as effective officers in the selection boards. For example, in my particular course, we were 16 officers who were handpicked for this particular course in the DIPR, but eventually only 2 of us got the opportunity to serve in the selection centers. Now let us look at the number of selection centers that we have in our country. So there are a total of 12 Army SSBs, a total of 5 Air Force and 5 Navy SSBs in the country. So these 12 Army boards have been organized into or grouped into 4 service selection centers, namely Selection Center East, which is in Allahabad, that has 5 SSBs, like it has 11 board, it has 14 SSB, 18 SSB, 19 SSB and 34 SSB. Similarly, Selection Center South, which is located in Bangalore, has 2 Army boards and 1 Navy board. Selection Center is in Bhopal, and that has 3 Army boards and 1 Navy board. Selection Center North, which has quite recently been established at Jalandhar, it has 2 Army boards. So similarly, जो Air Force के और Navy के boards हैं, वो country के अलग-अलग locations पे हैं, जैसे कि देहरादून, वाराणसी, गांधीनगर, Navy के विशाखापट्टनम, Coimbatore, like that. So these selection boards are spread over the entire length and breadth of the country. Now let's look at the organizational structure of a selection board. Now in a selection board, there is a president of the board who is of the rank of Major General / Brigadier, and it has a deputy president who is of the rank of a full colonel. Now these 2 officers are there to serve the board as interviewing officers. So they carry out all the interviews. Besides them, there are 4 GTOs who are of the rank of Major / Lieutenant Colonel, and there are 4 psychologists, out of which 1 is a services officer who is of the rank of Major / Lieutenant Colonel, and there are 3 civilian scientists or psychologists. Now, besides these, there are also, the administrative staff. There is a junior commissioned officer who acts as the tester JCO, and there is some clerical staff as also some groundsmen who help in the conduct of various activities that are done in the Services Selection Board. So this is the broad organization of a SSB. Now, there are a few myths about the selection center which I would like to burst in front of you. Now, the first and the foremost is that a lot of people, especially when your result comes out and you want to apply for a particular board, you have the choice to opt for a particular board. So usually candidates ask each other कि भाई सबसे आसान board कौन सा है, which is the board that they should opt for. Now, you have to understand that all these service selection boards, Army, Navy, Air Force, they are all standardized. In fact, there is a standardization exercise which is conducted every year, once a year, under the aegis of the Defense Institute of Psychological Research in one of the SSBs, where 1/3 of all the assessors, they come down and they look at the same SSB group of candidates, and all these officers, whether they are interviewing officers or GTOs or psychologists, they carry out the evaluation of this particular group, and it is seen that all of them are standardized. So it can never happen कि एक SSB ज़्यादा मुश्किल है, एक कम मुश्किल है. It is not true. This is a myth. Second myth is that sometimes candidates feel that the interviewing officer, because he's a senior officer, as compared to the others, so he has the veto power, so that he could overrule the other assessors. Now, this is not true. All three assessors have 1/3 contribution in your recommendation or otherwise. So it is just not true that one officer can overrule the others. So it is only with the mutual consent that they decide whether a candidate is to be recommended or not recommended. Another myth is that the interviewing officer is privy to or is aware of the psychological dossier which the psych is evaluating. So again, it is not true. He is not aware what you've written in your SD or in your psychological responses, because if that happens, then naturally the assessment of that officer will get biased. Let's say if the GTO tells the psychologist that during my outdoor tasks, I found a particular candidate, he had some fear of heights. So now naturally the psych's evaluation will get affected by that. Or if let's say the psych says that he found a particular kink in a candidate to the interviewing officer, then naturally interviewing officer का जो evaluation है वो bias हो जाएगा. So therefore it is just not true that they ever discuss a candidate outside the board conference. You are never discussed. The next myth is that in the SSB, preferential treatment is given to candidates who come from the army background or who have studied in Sainik schools and military schools. Now again, this is not true. It is purely by virtue of their grooming that they may get recommended, but it is just not true that the assessors were biased towards recommending candidates who came from the defense background. Not true. Now another myth, which is a little funny myth, is that the SSB carries a camera and they follow you in the market and they keep an eye on you at all times, even when you're not being tested. Now again, this is wrong. Nobody follows you. However, in case a candidate is found in a state where he argues with some staff, or he shows some indiscipline, or his behavior is not up to the mark, and it is reported to or brought to the notice of the assessors, then naturally they take cognizance of that. Especially if a candidate is found lying, that is taken to be as a very serious thing, and such candidates are never recommended in the SSB. So these were some myths that usually candidates have about the selection process. So all the best and happy viewing. Thank you.